In the beginning, life felt effortless, almost as if the world conspired to bring Gwen and me together. We met by chance at a minor league baseball game on a warm summer evening, and from the moment I saw her smile, I knew my life would never be the same. Gwen's energy was infectious. She radiated a quiet confidence, and her laughter could light up even the dullest of days. Those early years were filled with the kind of magic you only find once. Long conversations that stretched into the night, spontaneous road trips, and a shared vision of a future that seemed unshakable. As we built our lives together, our bond grew stronger, and I truly believed we could overcome anything. Gwen's ambition and determination inspired me daily, and I admired how she threw herself wholeheartedly into her career. I often told her she could conquer the world if she set her mind to it. But as the years passed, I began to notice how that same drive sometimes left her overwhelmed. Work demands increased, yet she never let it show, at least not at first. We reassured each other during those challenging moments, leaning on the promise that our love would always be enough. But life rarely unfolds the way we imagine. Subtle shifts started to creep into our relationship, almost imperceptible at first. Little by little, our carefree days gave way to routines dominated by obligations, and the laughter we once shared seemed more distant. In hindsight, it's clear that those changes planted the seeds of what was to come. Gwen and I were approaching our 4th anniversary, but something between us had shifted over the past few months. It started after her promotion to project manager. She took over a critical project when her boss stepped aside following a heart attack. The added responsibility brought long hours and intense stress, triggering Gwen's latent OCD. Our time together dwindled, and despite my efforts, cleaning, laundry, and foot rubs, my support seemed unacknowledged. Soon she withdrew entirely. My words annoyed her, my touches were unwelcome, and I felt like I was living with a stranger. When I confided in friends, they were surprised. Paul, my closest buddy, summed it up. "Les, that's rough. Most couples hit a slump, but this early? Are you sure you're not imagining it?" I explained that we hadn't been intimate in weeks and shared some of Gwen's sharp comments. His shock turned skeptical. Could she be cheating? I shook my head. No way. She's too busy with work, leading a massive platform overhaul that could make or break her career. Paul nodded. Then she's buried in stress. Just don't jump to conclusions and accuse her of anything. A supportive partner matters now more than ever. On another day, a stranger at the bar muttered under his breath, "Nothing worse than a non-supportive spouse, except a cheating one." That struck a nerve. Determined to trust but verify, I casually offered to bring Gwen lunch at work the following Saturday. She happily agreed, requesting pizzas for her and her team. When I delivered them, she introduced me to her co-workers, including 2 recent hires, Brad and Clark. Everything seemed normal. Over the next few weeks, I kept tabs discreetly and found no evidence of wrongdoing. Still, the emotional distance between us lingered. Finally, I decided to take a different approach. One evening, I set the table with candles, wine, and a homemade dinner. When Gwen came home, she seemed taken aback but smiled. "This is lovely, Les," she said, kissing me. After dinner, I handed her an envelope. "I know work's been overwhelming, but I think we need to reconnect. After your project wraps up, I've planned a week-long vacation for us. It's booked for next month. First-class flights to a couple's resort in the Dominican Republic. We have until tomorrow to cancel." Gwen flipped through the brochure, her eyes welling with tears. "This is perfect," she said, moving to sit on my lap. "Thank you. I can't wait to spend this time with you." She kissed me, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had my wife back. The next month crawled by. Gwen's project wrapped up smoothly, with only minor issues to address, and our intimacy slowly returned. It wasn't the fiery passion we once had, but once-a-week connection was a step forward. The day of our trip arrived. We packed light, 2 small suitcases, a backpack, and Gwen's purse. I planned on living in shorts and polos, while Gwen had packed a few sundresses, shorts, and 2 bikinis that promised a hot week ahead. Excitement buzzed as we stood in the first-class TSA line ready for a fresh start. Then, out of nowhere, Brad showed up. Gwen froze, her voice sharp with surprise. "Brad, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," he said, ignoring me completely. Annoyed, I jumped in. "Can't this wait? She's on vacation." Gwen's tone shifted, firm but tense. "Les, please go ahead. I'll catch up. This won't take long." Reluctantly, I left her with Brad and headed through security. At the gate, boarding began. I tried calling Gwen, but it went to voicemail. My texts, first, "Where are you?" then "You're cutting it close," were met with silence. The plane doors closed. My phone buzzed. A single text from Gwen. "I'm so sorry." Panicked, I asked the flight attendant if I could leave. Her sympathetic look said it all. "We can't return to the gate for that," she said, handing me a small bottle of bourbon. 5 hours later, we landed in Punta Cana. I immediately called Gwen, but she didn't answer. Instead, I saw her voicemail. "Les, I'm so sorry. Please read the email I sent you. It explains everything. I'm sorry to take the coward's way out. You deserve better." Dread filled me as I opened her email. "Les, I thought this trip could help us start over, but I can't keep lying. For the past 4 months, I've been having an affair with Brad. I never meant for it to happen, but it did." Her message went on. Apologies, excuses, and a full confession. I sat there, reeling. By the time I cleared customs, my hollow expression must have alarmed the agents. They pulled me aside for questioning, but after showing Gwen's Dear John email, they let me go. Defeated, I headed to the resort, hoping for a bed and some solace. Instead, I hit another wall. "Where's your wife?" the check-in clerk asked. "She couldn't make it," I replied, forcing calm. "I'm sorry, sir. This is a couples-only resort. We can't check in single guests." Desperation bled into my voice. "I paid $5,000. Can't you make an exception?" Rules were rules. The night manager kindly arranged a room at another resort and sent me there with a driver. Alone, in a strange place, I stared at the ceiling that night, wondering how it had all fallen apart. When I tried to check into the second resort, my credit cards were declined. Frustrated, I used my emergency card, another decline. I called Gwen, but she didn't answer. The bank's hotlines confirmed my worst fear. Both cards had been canceled. Desperate, I texted Gwen, "Why did you cancel the cards?" Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Brad thought it made sense since the resort was prepaid and all-inclusive. He said you wouldn't need them." Reading her message, I unleashed a string of curses that startled the hotel clerk. Thankfully, I had over $600 in cash, enough to pay for the night, though the dingy $300 a night room barely felt worth it. With half my cash gone, I sat on the bed trying to process everything. I couldn't access my bank accounts, so I called my brother in Denver. After convincing him and his wife that I wasn't joking, I endured their shocked reactions. "Not Gwen! And that witch!" Eventually, my brother agreed to wire me some money the next morning. Next, I called the airline. My return ticket wasn't transferable, thanks to my choice of the cheapest option, and buying a new ticket required cash in person. The soonest flight home was a red-eye on Tuesday. Left with nothing but time, I opened Gwen's email for the second time. "Les, I'm so sorry. I thought this trip might help us start fresh, but I've been lying to you. For the past 4 months, I've been having an affair with Brad. It started as emotional support during late nights at work. I resisted at first, but one Saturday, after the rest of the team left, I gave in. I wondered why you didn't notice me pulling away, and that only drew me closer to him. Now I see how many times you asked what was wrong and tried to help. But when you planned this trip, something clicked. I realized I wanted to save our marriage. The next day, I ended it with Brad, but he didn't take it well. He kept trying to pull me back in, and I was too weak to resist. Even at the airport, he convinced me to stay, saying you'd hate me once you found out. He was probably right. I couldn't face 5 hours sitting next to your anger. I need this week to process what I've done. By the time you return, I'll be gone. Please, don't hate me. I know I can't fix what I've broken, but I hope you find peace. With regret, Gwen." The letter answered a few questions, but left me angrier than before. Her affair had likely been happening right under my nose at the office. With an hour until the bar closed, I headed downstairs. A drink seemed fitting, a toast to my cheating wife and the end of my marriage. Growing up, my dad had drilled 3 rules about drinking into my head. "Les, getting drunk won't solve a thing. Don't be the weeping whiner, the violent jerk, or the laughing fool. Drink slow, enjoy the buzz, and know your limit. And if I ever catch you drinking and driving, I'll take away your car, no matter how old you are." Dad wasn't a teetotaler. He could hold his beer with the best of them, but I'd never seen him drunk or reckless. Tonight, his words echoed in my mind as I sipped my bourbon, steady and controlled. It was time to figure out how to start over. I knew I wouldn't linger in the bar past 2 beers, but I planned to enjoy them. Sipping my first President, I scanned the room. A few couples danced, including one pair awkwardly grinding to the beat. An overweight man with a rail-thin woman who could have been Olive Oil's twin. The bartender caught my eye, and we shared a knowing laugh. The absurdity of it all struck me. At least his wife didn't leave him stranded at the airport, I thought bitterly. My mind spiraled. Had I messed up? Was my marriage a lie? Or had something real fallen apart? For 5 years, 4 of them married. I thought we were happy. I nursed my drink, lost in memories of how it all began. We met at a Chiefs baseball game in Peoria, Illinois. Gwen stood out in a Ryan Sandberg Cubs jersey, a striking blonde with long legs and a quick smile. Although the Chiefs were a Cardinals affiliate, Cubs fans were common enough in the area. She was with friends, and I seized the chance to introduce myself by buying their group a round of beers. I used her jersey to start a conversation. "You're too young to be a Sandberg fan. Wasn't he before your time?" She smiled. "It was my dad's favorite jersey. He gave it to me." I held out my hand. "I'm Les." "Gwen," she replied, shaking my hand. She was an IT major finishing her senior year at Bradley University. I'd graduated 2 years earlier and was working as a design engineer at Caterpillar. Our small talk eventually circled back to Sandberg, and Gwen shared her dad's love of the Cubs. Dad always said the best days of his life were marrying Mom, having my brother and me, and watching Sandberg hit 2 homers off Bruce Sutter. "Your dad played baseball?" "Yeah, in AAA for the Cubs, but never made it to the majors." We hit it off immediately, chatting until the game ended. She gave me her number, and I called the next day. By the weekend, we were on our first date. A few months into dating, Gwen finally came back to my place after dinner and a movie. We sat on the couch kissing when she leaned back and whispered, "Take me to bed." "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said. "I haven't been with many guys, but I want this with you." We headed to my room, where I fumbled through my nightstand for protections I hadn't touched since we started dating. Gwen chuckled at my sheepish confession of celibacy. She preferred the lights off while I liked them on, so we compromised by leaving the hall light on, letting it spill gently through the doorway. As we got ready, I couldn't help but admire the elegant lingerie she had chosen. It was stunning. "I put this on for you," she said shyly. "Now I don't know if I should admire it longer or take it off," I teased. Gwen placed my hands on her bra clasp, silently answering the question. What she revealed was breathtaking, perfectly shaped and inviting in every way. I lavished attention on her, teasing and kissing her body, but when I tried to move lower, she stopped me. "No, don't," she said firmly. "You'll like it," I promised. "Not tonight. Just make love to me." I didn't push. There'd be time later to explore. She was tight and ready, her body responding despite her shyness. Our first time was tender but reserved. Gwen, though stunning, was hesitant and restrained. She clung to my shoulders, avoiding eye contact and saying little. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, a beginning. I realized early on that Gwen was inexperienced when it came to intimacy, but she was open to exploring, albeit cautiously. She was often hesitant when I suggested something new, like trying different positions or BJ, but she would eventually go along. She drew the line at mutual touch yourself, though, shaking her head at the idea. Our first night together was a good example of her initial shyness. After we made love, she curled up in my arms and asked for a shirt to sleep in. "No, we sleep in the nude," I said. "I've never done that." "You'll like it," I reassured her. And she did, falling asleep in my arms, her body pressed against mine. The next morning, she asked again for something to wear. "No, stay nude," I replied. She hesitated but didn't argue, walking to the bathroom and then joining me in the kitchen. She avoided eye contact, but I couldn't help admiring her graceful frame as she moved around my apartment. Over time, Gwen became more open. A month later, we started exploring new ways to connect on a deeper level. One evening, during an intimate moment, I noticed her reactions were particularly emotional and memorable. That night became a special moment that we both cherished. Outside the bedroom, we meshed well. The only friction came from her fiercely competitive family and friends, especially regarding sports. Once, we watched Purdue play Bradley in basketball at a pub with her group. Every time Bradley scored, one of her friends was in my face, cheering obnoxiously. Luckily, Bradley won, sparing me their wrath. When they demanded I buy the next round, I refused, insisting the winner buys, which didn't win me any favor with her crowd. Gwen stayed neutral, neither defending nor criticizing me. Meeting her father was another story. That Thanksgiving, after 4 months of dating, I accompanied Gwen to her parents' house. Her dad greeted me politely until Gwen jokingly announced, "Watch out, Dad! He's a Cardinals fan." His expression darkened, and I knew I was in trouble. This was 2011, years before the Cubs' historic World Series win, and her father, a former Cubs farm system player, clearly wasn't amused. Knowing I was already in a tough spot, I tried to downplay my allegiance, but I sensed 2 strikes against me. He likely guessed I was sleeping with his daughter, and now I was a Cardinals fan. For the next 5 years, he treated me like I was on probation, waiting for me to mess up. Despite the tension with her dad, Gwen and I grew closer. After Thanksgiving, she prepared to graduate and start her job at State Farm in Bloomington. I called her father to ask for his blessing, bought a ring, and proposed on Christmas Eve. Gwen said yes through happy tears, and we began planning a July wedding. We respected her family's preference for no premarital cohabitation, so Gwen kept her apartment with her roommates, though she stayed at my place most nights. After the wedding, we moved into a small farmhouse midway between my job in Peoria and hers in Bloomington. Our wedding day in late July was perfect. We honeymooned in Miami Beach, where Gwen turned heads in her tiny bikini, classy but alluring. For the next year, we made love every day, blissfully happy. Over the next 3 years, we planned for children and a house, aiming to start a family before Gwen turned 30. Then, 4 months ago, everything unraveled. And now here I was, thousands of miles from home, alone in the Dominican Republic, sipping beer and wondering how it all went so wrong. The bartender rang the bell for last call, signaling the end of a long night. I finished my second president, left a generous tip, and thanked him for providing a quiet space to think before heading back to my room. Monday morning brought more headaches. I discovered that all our shared bank accounts had been closed. Thankfully, my brother had wired me money, which I collected at Western Union before heading to the airport. The earliest flight I could get was Tuesday night. Resigned, I returned to the resort and extended my stay by a day. To avoid wallowing in misery, I went for a run along the beach, followed by a swim in the warm ocean. Still, seeing happy couples everywhere only deepened my sense of rejection. I retreated to my room, ordered room service to avoid more reminders of what I'd lost, and spent hours absorbed in a spy novel from the hotel boutique. Tuesday passed in much the same way, a run, a swim, and a quiet lunch in town before heading to the airport. 7 hours of waiting turned into more reading, and the red-eye flight offered little rest. After landing and enduring a 2.5-hour drive home, I finally stood in our bedroom, staring at the empty space where Gwen's clothes and belongings had been. By Wednesday noon, I woke from sheer exhaustion and called a friend to get the name of a divorce attorney. That afternoon, I met with Henry Abbott, a no-nonsense lawyer who assured me he'd protect my interests. He had me document every detail of the ordeal, from being stranded in the Dominican Republic without funds to the money I spent getting home. He also requested a full inventory of our shared assets and anything missing from the house. Henry warned me Gwen might try to serve me first. Letter. It positions her as the one ending the marriage, and will gain insight into their strategy, he explained. Sure enough, Monday morning, Sarah, our office administrator, informed me someone was waiting to see me. It was a process server with divorce papers. As I read through the papers, anger surged. I almost called Gwen to confront her, but stopped myself, remembering a friend's cautionary tale about a similar situation. Instead, I handed everything to Henry, who assured me we'd handle it. 2 months later, I sat in a courtroom, nerves frayed. The judge entered, a woman, and I braced myself for the worst. Gwen's lawyer presented their demands while Gwen avoided my gaze. Notably, Brad was absent, a calculated move, I assumed. When it was our turn, Henry laid out the facts, emphasizing Gwen's unilateral decisions and my abandonment overseas. The judge, clearly prepared, turned to Gwen. "Miss Harper," she said, addressing Gwen by her maiden name, "you've made no allegations of offense. Did you leave your husband simply because you fell in love with Mr. Bradley Parker?" After conferring briefly with her attorney, Gwen answered, "Yes, Your Honor, there was no offense." The judge nodded. "Thank you for your honesty. False claims of offense are something I do not tolerate in my courtroom." She reviewed her notes before delivering the ruling. "The divorce is granted, effective immediately. There will be no spousal support. Each party will retain their personal retirement funds and possessions. Joint assets will be split 50-50. From Ms. Harper's share, she will reimburse Mr. Lester for $9,000 in vacation costs, expenses incurred in the Dominican Republic, and return airfare. Additionally, she will cover all attorney fees for both parties and pay $3,200, representing half the rent for the 7 months since she left the marital home. The judge turned to Gwen, her expression firm. "You claim to have loved your husband. If this is how you treat someone you love, I can only imagine how you treat those you don't." And with that, it was over. No celebration, just relief. And the weight of starting over. The ruling left me speechless. Of the $20,000 in our savings, Gwen would be paying me back nearly $16,000. As my attorney Henry and I left the courtroom, Gwen called out behind me. "Les." I ignored her, stepping into the hallway where Brad sat waiting. He began to stand, but I was already in his face. "She'll cheat on you too," I said, walking past him without waiting for a reaction. Outside, I turned to Henry. "Lunch is on me," I offered, and we headed to a diner across the street. "I thought I was doomed when I saw the judge was a woman," I admitted. Henry chuckled. "That's a common misconception. Honestly, it's usually the older male judges who hand the cute wife everything. Judge Carter, though, you couldn't ask for better. She's tough but fair, and she doesn't put up with nonsense." "You knew it'd be her courtroom. Why not tell me?" I asked. "No need to get your hopes up or make you nervous," he said. "She's been married to the same guy for 40 years. He's a machinist, great golfer, and everyone at the club loves him. It's a true partnership. They're equals. She values that, which worked in your favor." Over lunch, Henry shared a story about Judge Carter putting a disrespectful local bigwig in his place during a country club event. Her loyalty to her husband and disdain for arrogance were clear. I laughed, easily imagining the scene based on my time in her courtroom. "You're different from most lawyers," I told Henry. "My dad worked over 30 years at CAT, and my mom raised 5 kids. When I got into law school, Dad hugged me and said, 'Don't become an a-ho.' He's 90 now, but he'd still set me straight if I needed it." After thanking Henry again, I walked away, determined to rebuild my life. Well-meaning friends and coworkers kept trying to set me up with women they thought would help me move on. The problem was, I wasn't looking for another relationship. Everything was still too raw. I just needed to blow off steam without strings attached. Unfortunately, dating someone's sister or cousin wasn't the right way to scratch that itch. Instead, I frequented bars known for casual hookups and even took dance lessons. Women love a guy who can lead on the dance floor and buy a couple of drinks, and I wasn't short on opportunities. But there were risks to playing the field. One night, I hit it off with an attractive woman. As we left the bar, I noticed a faint tan line on her ring finger under the light. Alarm bells went off. "Are you married?" I asked. Her deer-in-the-headlights look told me everything. "Yes," she admitted hesitantly, "but my husband's away." "Where?" "Afghanistan. He's in the army." Fury surged through me. "Your husband's risking his life and you're out looking to cheat on him? You should be ashamed of yourself." She broke down, collapsing onto the pavement in tears. "I'm sorry. I'm such a hoe. He's been gone 5 months and I worry every day. I got so lonely, and some guys at work kept hitting on me. I didn't want to cheat with someone I'd have to see again, so I went out tonight. I just wanted to feel like a woman again, to feel a man's arms around me. I didn't even know if I could go through with it. I'm sorry." Looking across the street, I spotted a late-night diner. "Put your ring back on," I said. "Let's get some coffee." I handed her my handkerchief to dry her tears. She looked at me gratefully as we walked. I didn't have it in me to judge her further. Life had a way of breaking people in ways I was only beginning to understand. Kelly and I spent the next hour in the diner as she opened up about her husband, Sergeant John Tyler, and the 2 co-workers at her office who had been harassing her. Their relentless advances had worn her down, leaving her vulnerable and confused. I urged her to report them to HR, and she reluctantly agreed. I drove Kelly home that night, and we made plans to have lunch the following Saturday so I could check in on her progress. Over the next few weeks, we met occasionally for coffee and sandwiches, just talking. She eventually told me the company had transferred her to a new division and reprimanded the 2 men. One afternoon, she walked into the coffee shop, her face glowing. "John's coming home in 2 weeks," she exclaimed. I congratulated her and let her know it would likely be our last lunch together. Though she looked a bit sad, she nodded in understanding. "Thank you for being my friend, Les. You helped me through some dark times, and I'll never forget it." A few days later, I walked out of my office to find a massive man in fatigues waiting for me. I recognized him immediately from the photos Kelly had shown me, John Tyler. "Are you Thomas Lester?" he asked. I didn't offer my hand, letting him set the tone. "Let's go somewhere to talk," he said. We agreed to meet at a bar a few blocks away, each driving separately. At the bar, I bought the first round. "Kelly told me everything," he said. "It's rough coming home to hear my wife confess she went out looking for a fling." "Well, it didn't happen. Not with me, and I doubt it did with anyone else." "She loves you, John. She just had a weak moment." "Why didn't you take advantage?" he asked bluntly. "My ex-wife cheated on me. I know how it feels, and I wouldn't do that to another man, especially one in uniform." "Did you ever serve?" "No, I didn't have it in me. But I respect the hell out of guys like you who do," he sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm crazy for risking my life and marriage over there. I've been thinking of leaving the army and finishing my degree. I was studying electrical engineering before I enlisted. If you apply to Purdue, let me know. I've got connections that might help. I handed him my card. He studied me for a moment. I don't think we can be friends. Every time I see you, I'll think about how close Kelly came to cheating. But I appreciate what you did for her. I understand. The offer still stands, though. Call me if you need help. We sat in silence for a while, finishing our beers. Before leaving, he shook my hand. You're a different guy, Lester. Thanks for everything. Weeks later, I received a letter from Kelly. John had left the Army, and they were moving to Texas, where he would finish his degree at Texas A&M. They planned to start a family after he graduated. She thanked me again and wished me well. Despite my own experience, I hoped they'd build a strong marriage. Deep down, I still believed in love. About a month later, I was surprised to find Gwen's younger brother, Pete, at my front door early one Sunday morning. Their father sat in the car parked in my driveway. Les, Dad and I need to talk, Pete said. Pete, you're welcome inside, but your father can stay in the car, I replied flatly. Pete relayed the message, his father visibly irritated, as Pete returned alone. I poured Pete a cup of coffee and sat down. Gwen's in a bad place, Pete said. Yesterday, Dad and I pulled her out of Brad's apartment. He hit her, and she's pretty bruised up. I'm sorry to hear that, I said evenly. But that's not my problem. Gwen and I have been divorced for 6 months. She's been crying nonstop, Pete continued. She says leaving you was the biggest mistake of her life. Dad and I were hoping you might take her back. I shook my head. I'm sorry she's hurt, but I could never trust her again. She broke my heart. Where is she now? At the Holiday Inn. She didn't stop us from coming to see you, but she couldn't face you herself. I hope you help her find a safe place, but it won't be with me, I said, standing to signal the conversation was over. Pete rose reluctantly and shook my hand. For what it's worth, I don't blame you. You treated her well and she threw it away. I had to try. Goodbye, Les. As Pete left, I avoided looking at their father. I heard the car pull away, and that was the last I ever saw of Gwen's family. Later, mutual friends told me she moved north, taking a job in Northbrook with Allstate. The year following my divorce was filled with fleeting encounters, over a dozen 1 or 2 night stands. I wasn't proud of it, but each left me a little more whole. Practice, as they say, makes perfect. I met Grace at a concert on the ISU campus, not a rock concert, but a performance by a Chicago chamber orchestra featuring variations on La Folia by Salieri and other Italian composers. The petite woman sitting next to me, with her Twiggy-like features and mod Brit vibe, struck up a conversation during intermission, asking if I was enjoying the music. Grace, a graduate student in graphic arts and a cellist, agreed to let me buy her a drink after the concert. At the pub, we exchanged stories. Despite her name, Grace wasn't raised in a religious household. Her parents, former commune members, named her after Grace Slick from Jefferson Airplane. When I mentioned living in a farmhouse, her face lit up. After walking her home, I got a cheek kiss and her number. Intrigued by how different she was from anyone I'd met, I called her the next day, and we planned to attend an art exhibit the following weekend. Work went well that week. I'd earned a promotion and a pay raise, so by Saturday, I was feeling great. When I picked Grace up on the sunny April afternoon, I considered suggesting beers on a patio instead of viewing student artwork, but I stuck with the plan. At first, I regretted it. Many pieces seemed designed solely to shock, including a triptych that blatantly depicted Mary in explicit acts with the Holy Trinity. Disgusted, I whispered, I think I'm ready to leave. Grace squeezed my hand. Let's check the next gallery first. If you still feel that way, we'll go. Reluctantly, I followed her, and was relieved to find artwork that actually inspired thought and emotion. One painting caught my attention. A man and woman, nude, walking down a staircase. Their faces were captivating, full of unspoken tension. Then I noticed the woman wore a wedding ring, but the man's hand was bare. The title card read, Oil on Canvas, Le Dernier Après-midi des Amoureux, by Grace Powell Adams. You painted this? I asked, stunned. She smiled knowingly. Yeah, do you like it? It's incredible. What does the title mean? The lovers' last afternoon. Now their expressions make sense. Why is it their last? I can't decide. What do you think? She asked. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. But before I could, Grace pulled me toward another room to show me a second piece. This one, a vibrant animation drawing of a giant fish tank teeming with life, was a complete departure from the first. This is amazing, I said. My niece would love it. Why is all the great art tucked back here? And that other stuff front and center. Grace laughed. The professor curating the show is trying to impress the Chicago avant-garde crowd. Rumor is he's also sleeping with the student who did the Unholy Trinity piece. Well, at least you have good taste, I said, earning another laugh. After the exhibit, we headed to the pub and spent hours talking. Grace surprised me with her grounded perspective, especially given her unconventional upbringing. She explained that the commune wasn't the free love stereotype people often imagined. My parents were monogamous, she said. I didn't lose my pureness until college, and I've only had a few partners. Yet her painting of the lovers was undeniably sensual. When I commented on it, she clarified, closeness isn't a contest. It's about sharing something meaningful. That's what made those relationships special. It wasn't about my pleasure or theirs, but ours. Grace's honesty and insight left me intrigued, and I couldn't wait to see her again. The evening air turned cooler, signaling the end of a long day. Grace mentioned she needed to leave early to finish a project for school. It had been a wonderful first date, and plans were made for her to come to my place for dinner the following week. On Wednesday, Grace arrived promptly. She was drawn to the overgrown garden patch in my backyard, intrigued by the tall fence and the buried portion designed to keep rabbits out. After a quick inspection, she joined me for dinner, where we talked about her life and interests. Grace shared details about her studies, her love for art, her ability to speak Italian and French, and her skill as a cellist. She even joked about her lack of athletic ability and nervousness in public situations, painting a vivid picture of someone deeply talented but unassuming. Before leaving, Grace proposed planting a garden in my backyard. She offered to handle all the work, from planting to harvesting, in exchange for sharing the produce. After discussing logistics, I agreed, drawn as much by the idea of fresh vegetables as by the thought of seeing more of Grace. Over the next 2 weeks, Grace worked tirelessly in the garden. She called me before each visit, and I often came home to find her immersed in the soil. One day, she rented a rototiller to prepare the ground, and I helped her finish the job. When a load of manure arrived, we spent a rainy weekend spreading and mixing it into the soil. Grace seemed overjoyed, expressing how much she missed the connection to nature and the satisfaction of working outdoors. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I began to appreciate the process myself. During one of these evenings, Grace mentioned her lease would soon be up and her roommates were graduating. She asked if she could rent my spare bedroom, offering to pay rent and share household expenses. Though I had hoped our relationship might become romantic, I agreed, knowing I enjoyed her company too much to turn her away. We discussed arrangements, dividing costs and responsibilities. Grace seemed thoughtful and considerate, ensuring everything was planned. With that settled, she left, promising to return soon to begin planting. As I watched her leave, I wondered what the future might hold for this unexpected connection. A warm, sunny Saturday morning seemed perfect for a productive day. I decided to bike into town for some office work, leaving Grace a note on the kitchen table to let her know I'd be back by 4 and hoped we could have dinner together. However, upon arriving, I realized the IT department had shut down the system for upgrades, a detail I'd completely forgotten. Despite the wasted trip, I was in a good mood. There was still time to enjoy the day and spend it in the garden with Grace. I headed home whistling. As I approached, the driveway gates were closed and Grace's car was parked inside. Curious, I peeked around the house toward the garden. There she was, working with a hoe, completely undressed except for her gardening boots. Her back was to me as she bent over to plant seeds, her movements deliberate and fluid. I froze, caught between admiration and guilt for watching. Not wanting to intrude, I decided to retreat and make noise as if I'd just arrived, giving her a chance to cover up. But as I turned, the barn cat darted in my path. I tripped, the bike clattering to the ground, and Grace spun around in alarm. She spotted me, froze momentarily, then reached for a nearby dress. In that moment, I saw everything: her petite frame, flawless skin, and natural beauty. Realizing I'd been caught, I locked eyes with her and saw something deeper in her hazel gaze. Vulnerability, curiosity, and maybe even desire. Without thinking, I rushed into the garden, wrapped my arms around her, and kissed her. To my relief, she kissed me back. It felt natural, inevitable. I told her I loved her, surprising even myself. Grace admitted she'd been unsure about how I felt, and assumed I saw her only as a friend. She had doubted her own appeal, comparing herself unfavorably to the photos of Gwen I still had in the house. I reassured her, confessing how beautiful and unique I found her. She seemed to believe me, her hand brushing against my arousal, a playful smirk forming on her lips. Moments later, I carried her into the house and to the bedroom. There was no hesitation as we embraced, ignoring our sweaty and dirt-covered bodies. The passion between us was raw and overwhelming. Afterward, we showered together, playfully washing away the grime before falling into bed again, this time exploring each other more slowly and intimately. Later, as we lay together, Grace asked if this meant she'd no longer need the second bedroom for herself. I smiled, realizing she wanted to move in permanently. She promised to wait until after finals, but agreed we were no longer just roommates. I couldn't resist asking about her gardening without clothes. She explained it was something she'd grown up doing, a way to feel connected to the earth. Swimming, too, was something she'd always done nude. Skinny dipping in the commune's lake had been her norm. The thought stirred something in me, and Grace teased me for it, climbing onto my lap and drawing us into another slow, sensual moment. We didn't get much planting done that day, but we eventually made it back to the garden, embracing the new rhythm of our relationship, one that seemed perfectly natural, like working the soil under the sun. Gardening without clothes had its appeal, but I couldn't wait to try skinny dipping next. It never crossed my mind to let Brad walk away unscathed after his role in wrecking my marriage. While Gwen bore equal responsibility for its collapse, Brad had brazenly disrespected our vows and pressured her to financially cripple me during the divorce. He deserved payback. I wasn't in a rush to exact revenge. As my relationship with Grace deepened, I questioned if it still mattered. The answer was clear. It did. But violence was out of the question. I wasn't willing to risk jail time, knowing full well I wouldn't last a day in prison. Instead, I turned to the internet. Over 2 years, I spent an hour a week researching Brad online, using aliases to quietly monitor his life. Patience paid off when an opportunity arose. Brad, now engaged to a stunning woman and working in IT at a conservative brokerage, was ripe for a reckoning. With the wedding weeks away, I decided to save his fiancée from future heartbreak. For $4,000, I set my plan into motion. Brad was a regular at a local hotel bar on Wednesdays, sticking around after most of his coworkers left. Enter Lacey, the Chicago call girl I hired. She didn't need much effort to lure Brad to her room. A little eye contact, a drink, and a few flirtatious exchanges later, he followed her upstairs. Hidden cameras recorded everything. As they began, there was a knock at the door. Lacey introduced Philip, her supposed co-worker, who pitched the idea of a threesome. Brad, already caught on film with the courtesan, agreed to participate. Whether it was Lacey's offer of backdoor, the thrill of a threesome, or sheer recklessness, he didn't hesitate. The footage revealed everything clearly. Lacey managed the situation with precision, keeping Brad distracted while ensuring key moments were documented. Screenshots, carefully cropped to protect identities, provided undeniable evidence of Brad's actions. One moment stood out as particularly revealing, highlighting Brad's inattentiveness to what was happening around him. Reviewing the footage with Lacey the next day, I selected the most incriminating stills. True to our agreement, her and Philip's identities remained protected. Lacey even offered me a free service, but I declined, committed to Grace and unwilling to jeopardize our relationship. The plan was a resounding success. Brad's behavior was thoroughly documented, leaving no room for denial. His fiancée received an anonymous package of photos just days before the wedding. I never checked to see what became of him afterward. My satisfaction came from knowing Brad had been exposed for who he truly was, sparing another person from the same pain he had caused me. Brad, still shouting profanities, bolted into the bathroom to wash his face. Meanwhile, Lacey and Philip gathered his clothes, removing his phone and wallet. As Brad stormed out, furious and ready for revenge, Lacey coolly tossed his belongings out the door, forcing him to choose between confrontation or retrieving his things. Opting for the latter, Brad dashed into the hallway, allowing Lacey to slam the door behind him. While Brad pounded on the door, screaming obscenities, Lacey calmly called the lobby to report a disturbance. The commotion drew neighboring guests, some capturing videos of the undressed man ranting in the hallway. These clips later surfaced online, further amplifying Brad's humiliation. Hotel security eventually chased him out of the building, while Lacey and Philip slipped away, never to be seen in Peoria again. The best screenshots from the hidden cameras, including the infamous money clip of Brad's face covered in Philip's contribution, were selectively distributed. Copies were sent to Brad's boss, his fiancée, her father, a few of his close friends, and a voyeur website. The fallout was as spectacular as expected, leaving Brad disgraced. I debated whether to reveal my role, but ultimately decided against it. Escalating the situation could jeopardize my relationship with Grace, and Brad had already been thoroughly humiliated. He left town shortly after, though the evidence of his actions would linger online for years. The next 15 months with Grace were the happiest of my life. Living and loving together in the farmhouse, she introduced me to new books and ideas, broadening my horizons. That summer, I met her parents at the commune and was surprised by their warmth and generosity. The 4th of July celebration there was one of the most memorable experiences I'd ever had. Grace even convinced me to try skinny dipping. Late that first night, with everyone else asleep, we swam together under the stars. By the following year, I was swimming nude in broad daylight alongside 20 others. Despite my initial hesitation, the experience felt surprisingly natural. Just a group of people enjoying the water and sun in a carefree way. 5 weeks before Grace's graduation, she shared bittersweet news. She'd been offered a job in Paris with a company producing an animated adaptation of A Christmas Carol. While I was thrilled for her, the thought of her leaving was difficult. Grace explained that this opportunity could establish her career and make future freelance work more viable, though she promised she'd return. I knew it wasn't fair to hold her back. Despite my heartache, I told her to accept the offer. Over the next few days, I wrestled with whether to give her the diamond ring I'd bought as a graduation gift, but decided against it. She needed to chase her dream without feeling tied down. On the day Grace graduated, we celebrated with her family before driving to O'Hare. She left her car, belongings, and most of her art supplies at the house. Her mother hugged me tightly and whispered, "She loves you. Trust her." I kissed Grace goodbye at the terminal, watching her disappear into the airport, a place I now loathed more than ever. First Gwen, now Grace. This time, though, it wasn't an ending. It was a new chapter. I clung to the hope that Grace would return and we could pick up where we left off. For now, all I could do was wait. We kept in touch constantly, letters, emails, photos, and weekly Skype calls. We planned for me to visit Paris during my next vacation, but none of it truly eased my loneliness. Depression settled in, and even the garden Grace and I had planted was left to fend for itself. Most of the crops were close to rotting when a couple of co-workers visited and, seeing the state of things, asked if they could harvest the vegetables. I told them to take whatever they wanted. Debbie King, one of our admin assistants and a widowed mother of 2, came by that Saturday with her boys. They spent hours gathering crops. When I asked what she planned to do with all the vegetables, she said her neighbor was teaching her to can food for winter. I offered her some jars I had left from Grace's canning projects, joking that she'd have to return them if we needed them next year. Debbie smiled knowingly and said, "She loves you, Les. She'll be back." I mumbled a quiet, "I hope so," as I walked back into the house, letting her leave with her boys, boxes of produce, and jars in tow. Grace was planning to come home for 10 days over Christmas and New Year's, but we decided I'd visit her in Paris in early November. She'd be working during the weekdays, but we'd have the evenings and weekends to enjoy together. Boarding my flight, I hoped my streak of bad luck at O'Hare was finally behind me. When I arrived at de Gaulle, Grace was waiting for me outside customs. The sight of her felt like the sun breaking through clouds. We embraced and kissed, prompting a few onlookers to clap. After grabbing my bag, we took a cab to her apartment. Barely inside the door, we were already pulling off each other's clothes, savoring the closeness we had missed for so long. Her apartment was a tiny efficiency, barely big enough for a pull-out sofa that passed for a bed. It was uncomfortable, but Grace's laughter and teasing about her French luxury made it impossible to complain. She pointed out that some of her co-workers lived in even worse conditions. I didn't care. With her in my arms, it felt like home. Jet lag caught up with me after our first round of lovemaking, and I fell asleep. Waking briefly in the dark, I relished the warmth of Grace's undressed body wrapped around mine before drifting off again. The next time I woke, she was dressed for work, kissing me softly. She promised to return in the evening, and we'd have the weekend to ourselves. Once she left, I explored the apartment. The kitchen was little more than a counter with a mini fridge and a hot plate. Grace had left instructions for the coffee pot and a baguette with jam for breakfast. After getting ready, I ventured out to explore Paris on foot, soaking in the city's charm. By late afternoon, I was back in the apartment reading when Grace burst through the door. She declared she wouldn't let me out of her sight for the next 64 hours. I joked about staying in, but she reminded me of her fridge's size and Parisian dining habits. She suggested we make love before dinner, already shedding her work clothes, and I couldn't argue with her reasoning. Saturday was a whirlwind. We visited the Musée d'Orsay, had lunch near Notre Dame, and took in the city's vibrant atmosphere. That evening, Grace introduced me to her coworkers at a restaurant. It was clear she was well liked. Her colleagues were eager to meet the man who had captured her heart. As I sat among them, listening to their stories and laughter, I felt the weight of the months apart lifting. Being with Grace again reminded me of how much she meant to me and how lucky I was to be in her life, even if only for a short visit. When we arrived at the restaurant, introductions were quick, handshakes with the men and air kisses with the women. We settled into small groups, and I found myself chatting with Holly, an English woman, Megumi, a Japanese woman, and Claude, a Frenchman. Despite their accents, Megumi and Claude spoke better English than Holly, whose British slang threw me off. Grace flitted between clusters, her French flowing easily in conversations. Our group's conversation started lightheartedly with a debate over rock and roll. Holly and Claude teamed up to argue for British supremacy, citing Exile on Main Street as the pinnacle of rock. Megumi sided with me, crediting Elvis and Chuck Berry as the true pioneers. Her personal favorite? Cheap Trick's Live at Budokan, which she grew up hearing on her mother's vinyl. The exchange was friendly and fun, with no one taking it too seriously. When I jokingly asked Grace for her pick for the best rock singer, male or female, she declared, without hesitation, Grace Slick. The mood shifted abruptly when Grace raised her voice in heated French, berating Jean-Paul, one of her coworkers. Everyone fell silent, watching in stunned amazement. Even patrons at nearby tables paused to listen. After a minute, Grace apologized to the group and announced we were leaving. Outside, I asked what had happened. She explained that Jean-Paul, a classic chauvinistic jerk, had insulted me in French, assuming I wouldn't understand. Grace overheard and refused to let it slide, defending my honor. She also revealed that Jean-Paul had been pestering her for a date, despite her repeated rejections and clear declaration of our relationship. Renee, who invited Jean-Paul despite knowing the tension, added to her frustration. We met Grace's coworkers again before my trip ended, this time without Jean-Paul or Renee. Claude made a point to assure me that not all Frenchmen shared Jean-Paul's anti-American sentiment. The evening was drama-free and a lot of fun, reinforcing my faith in our future together. The following months dragged. Winter on the prairie felt endless, and I missed Grace terribly. Her visit during the holidays helped, but her absence after was even harder to bear. Though we planned a March visit, Grace warned that her work hours were overwhelming as her project entered crunch time. With deadlines looming, I canceled my trip, counting down the weeks until her June return. By May 10th, spring was finally in full swing. After work, I drove home, looking forward to relaxing on the porch with a beer. The weekend before, I had rented a rototiller to prep the garden, thinking of Grace as I worked the soil. I had vague plans to plant some tomatoes and beans, but mostly enjoyed the connection to her it gave me. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the gates were closed. Curious, I parked and walked toward the house. There, in the garden, was Grace, leaning on a hoe, completely undressed. We stood frozen for a moment, staring at each other before she dropped the hoe and ran into my arms. She explained that her project had wrapped early and she'd volunteered to leave, catching the first flight home. She had hoped to surprise me and asked if it was okay. I didn't answer. Instead, I rushed inside, retrieved the ring I had hidden in the safe, and dropped to one knee in front of her. "Will you marry me, Grace?" It took her a moment to process, but when she found her voice, she said yes. Laughing, she suggested Sunday for the wedding, just enough time to get a license and invite our families. We married in the garden, muddy as it was. Both sets of parents, a few siblings, and close friends attended the intimate ceremony. Grace, much to my parents' relief, wore a dress. We stayed in the farmhouse until the harvest, spending the summer searching for a place of our own. We found the perfect property north of town near the river. It had 4 acres, with 2 wooded, plenty of room for Grace's garden, and a large garage that would double as her studio. We planned to live in the existing double-wide while building a house, though construction stalled when winter arrived. Grace, now freelancing and painting full-time, sold one of her works, Le Dernier Après-midi des Amoureux, for $8,000. Her success meant she could focus on her art and the garden while preparing for her next role, stay-at-home mom. Our first child was due in May, and Grace wanted a big family. I couldn't believe how lucky I was, married to my dream woman, living on a beautiful property, with a great job and a baby on the way. The only challenge? Convincing Grace to keep her clothes on while gardening next spring, especially with the builders on site.